Welcome to The Truth in This Art. I am your host, Rob Lee, and we are back in Philadelphia, lovely Philadelphia. And today, my guest is a Philadelphia-based muralist and paper cutout artist whose site-specific work is designed to fit into architectural niches and public spaces. Please welcome Joe Boruchow. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
It's great to have you on, and thank you for popping on and being a part of this series. I realized it was something someone told me recently that not everybody comes on here, so it's just like it's kind of like cool to have like really interesting people share their time with me. You have a busy schedule, I have a busy schedule, but you're making the time for me, so I appreciate it. And it's really, really cool. And before we get too deep into it, deep embedded, cutting through the paper and the murals, share your story. Where'd you grow up? What was your first quote unquote art experience? And talk about some of your inspirations, please.
Well, I grew up in Arlington, Virginia, right outside of D.C. Both my parents are psychiatrists. And my father was a art collector and would take us in his own collecting, would take us with him on his studio visits and whatnot. And there was one artist that I was really smitten with. I loved her work. Her name was Patricia Tobacco Forrester.
Nice.
And she's a plein air watercolorist. These huge, hyper-realistic watercolors on paper that she did outside in capturing nature. And visiting her studio just blew me away. I was 9 years old, and I remember going home and busting out the watercolors and trying to do the same thing. And I knew from that moment on that's what I wanted to do, except for a brief period in my young adulthood where I thought I had to do something else. But I always knew I wanted to be an artist. Then when I was also, my dad used to take us up individually. I have two sisters. He was from New York. And would take us up to New York, one of us once a year, and to galleries and stuff. And I was a big Keith Haring fan. This was when I was 12. And we went to Keith Haring's gallery, Tony Schifarzi gallery, and asked the receptionist if Keith was around. And she said he'd be here in 15 minutes. And if you wanted to wait around, that'd be cool. And so we sat around and waited for Keith Haring to show up, and he invited us up to his studio. And
nice.
That was amazing experience for me. Getting to see his studio and talk with him. He signed all kinds of stuff for me. I still got tons of swag from that experience.
Oh wow!
That picture.
That's amazing. That sounds really good. And having that, I kind of want to replace my experience of just living in a project. We're going to New York? When? No, it's great. And I think I had an uncle, and I never met him, right? But because he passed a few years before I was born, and my relatives who saw him and sort of the work he was doing, these large scale paintings, they were like, no, you had what he has. Because I was a comic book guy.
Okay.
It's always every year all right, Jane wants color pencils. Jane's going to need this drawing manual and all of that. And, I got hit with this sort of, go to the art school, go there, try to get it as a, 13-year-old, 12-year-old. I was I don't know if it's that good. Crushes it, killed it. And I shifted into something else creative, whether it was writing poetry or rap. No one is ever going to hear my rap songs from the late 90s. Or even doing this, in doing this almost 14 years, it's that sort of through line. And I think there's a kinship with it of what you were describing, that you knew art was kind of going to be your thing. Mm-hmm. I knew something creative, because I think I'm very apprehensive to say, this is art. People will say this is journalism, this, that, so on. I just it's something creative. Yeah. And I think in those terms. So, you touching on being born near the nation's capital and living in Philadelphia, I feel like there's a Liberty Bell or something here. I don't know. But as part of the iconography, how is living in these places affected, how maybe you go about your work, maybe some of the subject matter, some of the thinking that goes into your work?
I feel like I was politicized at a really young age. Just being near D.C., my parents were very interested in politics. A lot of their clients were politicians and people that worked with politicians. So I was very aware of it very, very early. And that's definitely stuck with me. And also the seeing Keith Haring's activism was also a great influence on me. As far as Philly, I've actually never seen the Liberty Bell, and I've never been to the Washington Monument either. I've been to it, but I've never been up in it.
Same.
So it's funny how you grew up in a place and then you don't see those main tourist attractions. But yeah, I definitely feel like by osmosis, I absorb the history and feel some of the burden of having to relate my work to that.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah, I think like that was one of the things that really caught my attention, and you're wearing the shirt with the images on there, the Brittany Griner, and I just remember like, you know, seeing it and I was like, this is catching my attention. And I think you would be the third person with like a paper cut sort of background I've interviewed. Mm-hmm. So I'm getting all of you. And it was just like, let's have the conversation, let's see where it goes, and kind of doing some of the research as opposed to internet stalking. I like to call it research.
It's one and the same.
It's the same. So your paper cut work, right? Explore sexuality, politics, history, and art, amongst other things. What role does an artist have in that sort of conversation? Like you touched on being politicized early and things of that nature. Like, what role does an artist have? Do they have a sort of responsibility, like from your vantage point, do they have sort of responsibility to comment on this stuff? Or should they, as you know, some people are told, stay in their lane, or the basketball or the head, just show up and dribble, show up and paint? So what is that role for an artist?
Well, I think it's a personal decision on any individual artist. For me, I've always been, I've always had a real, acute sense of justice and sense of outrage at injustice that I've always felt like I had to share with people, for better or for worse. To take this piece, for example, the Brittany Griner piece, my goal for that was really just to raise awareness. I felt like the story was so quiet for so long. It still is. And I'm still shocked at the amount of antipathy that she gets from people that I know that say she shouldn't have been carrying anything there. It's like it's her fault, stuff like that. So I just wanted to put something out there to let people know that there are people thinking about it. You know what I mean?
Yeah. No, I get that, yeah.
Trying to find sympathetic people, I guess that's another part of the reason I do it. Just trying to vent my outrage, my anger, try to find a good outlet for it,
Yeah, again, the sort of kinship thing where, in this sort of start, how I was describing what was behind this podcast as starting out, mine was this indignation of like, how dare you talk about Baltimore that way, mm-hmm. or this city or that city, and being a data analyst or data professional almost as long as a podcaster. So having, in a real sense, the storytelling capabilities and the data knowledge to back up both of those things, one hand washes the other, and just looking at it, it's like, this is not true. And that's like these things, these sort of politicized talking points of the murders here, the this, the that, the so on. I was like, they're all racially coded. Mm-hmm. And I was like, let's not do that. And I was like, how do I, instead of just getting mad, because I was like, that's not going to help anyone. I think mad in the sense that it's destructive or F this guy or F that or whatever, that doesn't really help in the big scheme of things. And, I remember down in Baltimore, we had Freddie Gray and all the fallout with that. I was wrapping up a podcast and that news came over my phone. And it was kind of like, oh, well, this is what happens here. And I was like, no, I don't like this feeling. I need to really process that and really pick at that a little bit. And it is that thing that you were touching on, I think, with Brittany Griner. It's like, oh, well, moving on. There's a justification that some people try to create That it's just like, no, this is a person.
Mm-hmm.
Or, now I could be, really wild about it. It's like, let's not let, Trump win in this regard of, you got out a U.S. citizen. Just from the standpoint of, like, ASAP Rocky did something goofy in another country, and you got him out at the end of the day. That's what it looks like. So we're not going to do this for a black woman for something that might be less offensive.
Mm-hmm.
If we're doing that sort of, like behavioral politics of this, you did the wrong thing. Drugs are bad. So whatever you get, you deserve. No, we're not doing that. If you want to, people talk about patriotism. Let's at least go from that standpoint.
Yeah.
Let's just protect our people abroad or what have you. Let's get our people back. And I don't know. I just think like, there's this thing that I remember, seeing my therapist years and years ago. And I would just tell him, I was like, I don't really get mad about things, but I do get passionate about
mm-hmm.
it. And it looks a certain way. And he was like, well, anger is energy for change. And I was like, okay, then I am angry. And I am going to do this podcast. And I do this I am motivated and kind of obsessed with it. And that comes out in this sort of work and this amount of stuff, because the driving point is what's really happening in a place. What are the thoughts that go into the person's work other than it looking really cool or really interesting? So now, this is a question I've had to put in because of the name of the podcast. What role does this concept or this idea around truth plays into your work?
I always just try to shoot from the hip, and sometimes for better or for worse. I don't know if that really means truth or not, but I guess it's kind of an impulse, something makes you feel a lot of feelings, so you feel like you have to exercise that and work it out, and you work it out in your drawings, and then you refine it to the final piece, and somehow it helps you digest those feelings. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
The other thing I wanted to make a point, let's circle back on the Brittany Griner thing. I think the reason her case has also really moved me is because it feeds into the whole global threat of authoritarianism and on people who are different, she's a tall, lesbian, black woman in another country who's just is held as a political prisoner. It's like, I don't think you can get a more perfect symbol for what's going on, and the injustices of what's going on, and the whole global authoritarian rise.
Yeah. So I want to talk about. I still have another paper question, but I want to talk about process a little bit too. So the next question is probably going to be in process. If you can, work that in as well. If we talk about process, that would be great. But so I see a lot of the paperwork is sort of this black and white thing, which I feel like is intentional. Mm-hmm. So like, why are you only working in, like, from what I've seen, only working in like those colors, and and I have another bullet point with it, but I at least want to start there.
It's even more than just black and white. All the black has to connect, so it's even more of a constraint. I was actually listening to one of your podcasts with a guy from RISD, painter. I can't remember his name.
I think that was Elijah. Maybe?
Yes, exactly. He was talking about constraints using just very limited colors in his painting, and that's something I really connected with. Sure. For me, it's always like the limits are where all the possibilities are. Yeah. I remember I like to write as well, and I took a lot of creative writing classes, and one of the best creative writing lessons that I ever had was where they gave you the first line and the last line, and you had to fill it all in. Yeah. And that kind of constraint I really feel like I thrive under. So I've tried to move out of the black and white paper cutout stuff, but somehow in that box, I just can think better. I just flow, Yeah. And I think that's a way for a lot of artists. Some, I guess that's not true. There are some who just do everything very well. That's not me. So, I'd like to really like hone in on a really specific craft as well, just get as good as I possibly can at it, you know?
Yeah. As you remember, like sitting down with a few different photographers, and the most recent like photo shoot that I did, the photographer was like, "Do you do photos all the time?" I was like, "No, I do not." I was like, "I break cameras actually," and she was like, "You are foolish." And she's like, "Don't mind me. I'm just in my process. I'm trying to figure everything out." She's like, "What piece of furniture?" Shout out to Sean Champion. "What piece of furniture here like speaks to you?" And because we're doing this photo shoot inside of like basically a furniture warehouse and so on. And I was like, this one. It was like this big lazy boy. And I was like, oh. And she's just like, "Look, I'm going to be looking at you strangely. This is just my process." And I'm like, oh, this makes sense. And this is how this person works. And I think there's a lot of allowances there. So when that talk I was telling you about earlier, I was asked, "Are you going to go into video?" And I was like, I don't think that's my lane. I don't think that's my space. It's like, I think this is my space. I think I have more control in it, and I keep it interesting. Like, before we got together, here, pretty much strangers. I could have come from robbing a bank before I got here. You're like, I have no idea where did all that money come from. So I think that's what keeps it really interesting for me. While having sort of these restrictions, like I try to have this minimal contact with the person, and if the interview goes really well, great. And but if it doesn't, also great. Like, it's just how it works. But I think having those restrictions and that sort of process that makes sense for you at that time, you can either go really far with it and you don't have this sort of, at least from my standpoint, this burden of, that's a stupid question. Or even from the guest standpoint of, I've already answered this before, let me give them something a little bit more juicy and seasonal. Well, seasoned, rather. Mm-hmm. So, in what other parts, like, when you get into, like, thinking about your process, like, what is the, sort of that start to finish, whether it's in a mural, whether it's in sort of your paper cut work, like, how are they, like, similar? And, like, what is, like, how is the process? Like, what's the thinking that goes into it? Like, where do you start with something in the middle? And when do you know that, all right, we're getting towards the ninth inning here. Mm-hmm. The closer's, like, warming up.
Yeah. Well, I'll just walk you through my process. So it always starts with a thumbnail sketch. Always drawings is the core of my practice. And they can be the quickest little messy thumbnail, or they can be pretty well rendered. It depends. But I always go back to that thumbnail throughout the process, and all the information is always there. It's just about refining it and getting it to where it needs to be presentable. So the thumbnails are really important because they're done quickly and just under the flash of inspiration. Yeah. And I try to carry that through to the final process. So I always do my thumbnails, no protractor, no ruler, no compass, real quick drawing. Then from there, I'll work out a line drawing using those tools. I definitely use a lot of rulers and compasses and, scientific perspective, stuff like that, to really try to create a space. And then from that line drawing, I'll then work out all the blacks and whites, figure out how all the black connects, figure out how to do any kind of rendering I need to do, or like push things to the back, bring things forward, how to, there's a lot of different tricks to doing that with just black and white, like graphic tricks. And then, so once I get that all figured out, I'll go back to the line drawing, trace that, and put a piece of, carbon paper between that and a black piece of paper, trace it onto the black piece of paper. So I have all my line work there. And at that point, when I'm ready to cut, I know everything, every shape that I'm going to do, pretty much. I mean, there's always a question here and there, but pretty much I know every shape that I need to cut out, and I just go at it, just excising each white space. It's a very time-consuming process. It takes, and my work is also very small. And I blow it up. Like for instance, the Brittany Griner piece is only like 4x6. Nice, yeah. It's like that big. And I like doing that because it reads from far away.
Yeah.
So when you're working really small, you can get a sense of what it's going to look like in the environment, and it reads better. If you work really big, you tend to put too much detail in, and things get lost with all the stuff going around it. If you can work small and blow it up, you get a real graphic effect. But after I complete the cutout, I throw it on a scanner, scan it. I usually have to do because the scanning always picks up some shadow of the paper cutout, like the relief between the white paper behind it and the actual paper cutout. And so I always have to go and correct that stuff in Illustrator. It's the only thing I know how to do on Illustrator. I hate working on the computer. But then I blow it up, print it up, and either paste it or paint it or whatever I need to do. I don't know if that answers your question.
No, it does, and I have a paper cut friend that's going to probably be listening to this because she gave me a gift. It's my logo, the logo that's on that bag, but as a paper cut.
Oh, cool!
And I was like, "How long does it take you to do?" She said, "It didn't take that long." I was like, "No, it didn't." It was like, "You paper cutters." I was like, "You guys are out here." It was like, "What do you have a preferred blade or what have you that you use for you?" Yeah,
I use an Excel number 11. They're the best blades. They beat an X-Acto every time. X-Acto's tips break.
They do.
They do. Yeah, you got to get the Excel. New Jersey's own.
I wanted to have that nice plug in there because I know people are about their tools. It's like going to Texas and saying, "Where you get your barbecue?" It's talking to a paper cutter. Where you get your blades?
Yeah. People always ask me that. I used to break blades all the time. I used to go through 7-8 blades of paper cutout. I don't anymore for some reason. I think I've just have better technique now, and I can use one blade for 2 paper cutouts now, so very economical.
So I also read that graphic novel. So I read about that a little bit. In addition to your mural and paper cut work, do you sort of try to dive into other creative practices to kind of take not necessarily a break, but more of a I need to work on this and it's going to help me in this in the long run, whether it's working on a sketch, working on a painting, things of that nature. And speaking of graphic novel a little bit too.
So the graphic novel, again, was just a flash of inspiration. I started working on it, and it just grew and grew. Took me over a year to complete. It's 100 paper cutouts. And I submitted it for a grant for the Xeric Foundation, which I don't believe is around anymore. I think it was run by one of the guys that invented the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles.
Nice.
They had a self-publishing grant, which I got in 2008, I think it was. So I was able to actually publish them. And but yeah, it was just kind of a psychological kind of noir story that just came to my head, and it was a real long project, and I think I got scared away from jumping into anything like that again because it was so all-consuming and it took so long, and I feel like it's hard to get any kind of remuneration from something like that unless you have something set up ahead of time, like someone's paying you to, or you have some sort of way to get it out there and get something back from it. So I've hesitated to get back into that. But yeah, it's always whatever I'm inspired to do. It's what I'm working on, or whatever someone hires me to do.
Which is it's almost a natural segue there. So it's like you got the questions beforehand. So talk about sort of that commissioned and non-commissioned work, and creatively, what are those non-negotiables for you? I don't know if I'm the right person for you if this is your project or what have you, because people come to me, they want someone to be the voice for it, or they want someone to be the consultant for it and help them realize their sort of podcasting voice or their storytelling. And a lot of times they don't have a sense of what they're looking for. And then through the conversation, I realize that I'm not the guy for this.
Yeah.
So tell me about that for you.
Well, an easy tell is when they ask me to add color. If they ask me to add color, I know I'm not the guy for them. Yeah, totally. I always do a little research on whoever I'm working for, make sure that we're pretty much aligned ethically, most of the stuff that I get hired to do are people that know my work, and they've seen it, they know what I'm about. So I don't really have a big problem with getting on the same page with them. I like to keep them in the loop of my process to make sure, because it is so time consuming, and it is because the nature of the paper cutout is it's impossible to change once it's done, So I try to keep them in the loop and make sure that we're on the same page all the way through, before I actually really put the effort into making the cutout. Yeah. Does that answer the question?
No, it does. It does. Okay. Yeah, because, I'll get a sense of, what someone wants. And, you've probably heard it. Everyone's doing a podcast now. And it's just like, all right, I'm available, I'm around, and so on. But it's like, really, what does this look like at the end of the day? Am I a hired gun? Mm-hmm. And I'm coming in to kind of help facilitate this? Am I consulting? Am I running the whole thing? And you just, and I've done each one of those probably in the last like 6 to 8 months. And I think the one when it's just like, we just want you, and, we're hiring you to do these and we're going to sponsor it. Those are the ones that I sort of
like that.
Because, I'll give them a sense of where I'm at. We have very understood, like, these sort of memos of understanding of this is how we're doing. And to your point of, here's the process as we're going along. Mm-hmm. So it might be 8 interviews. I can't, you can hop on the interview if you want and listen to what we're doing. But for the most part, once the episode is ready, here you go. Here's this next one and so on. And this is kind of what I'm doing. Here's the questions, maybe if you want to see those. And then there are others that, hey, we were just kind of looking for you to ask the questions that we write for you. And it just doesn't sound like me.
Yeah.
It doesn't quite work. And it's like, and I kind of struggle with it at times of, do I need, full creative control over something? And, being told that that's not what you should ask for, but really that's probably what I need.
Yeah. It's weird too now with the way people expect you to be able to go back and change things digitally. And that's kind of a pain in the butt now, It's like yes. When people have that expectation. So I really like to work with people that know what I'm about, what I'm doing, have seen the paper cutouts, actually seen them, see what the actual the art object is, and I think once they have an understanding of that, I'm sure if it's with your work, once they listen to the podcast, see what you're about, they know what they're in for when they hire you, and they like that.
I think the next thing that I'm going to do to be even more pretentious, I think I'm going to record 2 cassettes.
Oh, cool.
I think I'm going to do that. It's like, I don't know if I can go back and digitally and change any of that. It's like, here's the tape once I'm done.
Drop a cassette. They don't have anything to play that on.
Like it's my demo.
Yeah.
So this is the last real question I have, and the other ones are the rapid fire ones. So, and again, I want your take on this. Aside from money, because I think money is too obvious, because it's kind of like, if someone drops $1 million on me right now, I'm probably going to buy something ridiculous, like a gold suit, like a suit literally made out of gold. It's like, oh, that's chainmail. What are 3 things that, from your vantage point, you think artists need?
Need time. Time is the number one thing. You need a good room, space, studio, whatever you want to call it, to make your art. And you need inspiration. You need to be out and about and keep learning. You need to be reading and talking to people and going to coffee shops and chatting. And that was one thing that was hard about COVID, like not being around people. I found very difficult. I really missed my coffee shop.
I'm a coffee shop guy too.
Times, yeah. But yeah, those are the 3 things that I feel like really fuel. Yeah. I think people really don't realize how much time you need. I mean, there's so much time to reflect that you have to have as an artist. That time you're staring out the window is time well spent. Mm-hmm. Time spinning your wheels. That's really furtive moments, and they turn into real ideas. Yeah.
I agree with that. Yeah. Yeah, I think you mentioned RISD like earlier, and like the last, like I went to Nashville between, but the last place that I actually went to do like a trip, like this wasn't work, it wasn't something else. It was going to Rhode Island. I was going to Narragansett, and no, it was actually Providence. We went to Narragansett later, but it was Providence. And really doing the things that I would do. Like they have this small chain there, coffee shops. I went to each one. I was like, in that week, I was like, I'm going to each one of these. And I worked on a few questions, but, you know, I was kind of just taking a walk, just walking and just kind of doing nothing. Not with, I need to be here by this time. It's like, I'm going to do a few things today. I'm going to accomplish a few things, but I'm going there to kind of enjoy. From the sort of social standpoint, I'm going to go to a few nice restaurants. I'm going to go to an art gallery. I might even go to a zoo. But I think that it opens up so much different thinking and how I go about things. Like the trip I was telling you about earlier when I was in Austin, I was just walking. It was 106 degrees each day I was there, by the way. So right there. I was like, is this a mirage? And
was this during the blackouts too?
I think so, yeah.
Oh, man.
And there was a bumper sticker that I walked by. And it was talking about like this idea of magic, and it's like art is magic. And literally, I pulled out my notepad and wrote down this idea, and I got 3 questions just off of a bumper sticker. And I was like, I wouldn't have that if I didn't take this walk. I wouldn't have met the person at the antique shop if I didn't take this walk, which eventually turned into a podcast. So yeah, absolutely, we need time to like kind of do nothing.
Yeah, you do. You really do.
So in this last portion here, I got some rapid fire questions for you.
I'm ready.
And don't overthink it. So here's the first one. What is your go-to snack?
Go-to snack is, these days, I like oyster crackers.
Okay. Oyster crackers good.
Yeah.
When is your favorite time to work? It could be during a part of the year, like I like to work in a season or a certain part of the day, but when is your favorite time to work?
Now it's from, all my cylinders are firing between 11 a.m. and beyond. I could go till probably 9 if I didn't have to pick up my kid and make dinner and all that stuff. But I have a really hard time getting cooking before 11 a.m.
So we're getting you at peak time right now.
Yeah, you are. It's just the beginning of peak. 3 o'clock is peak. 3 o'clock is like...
That's when some people need to get that Red Bull. It's like, I need to come back. I need to return. On the train up, I was like, all right, I did not have coffee. I'm a coffee guy. Like, I need that. I need like either a red eye or a black eye or something to kind of get everything kind of like locked in. And I was joking with my partner. I was telling her, I was like, look, I'm going to get smelling salts before a podcast. She was like, no, you're not. She's like, I'm not allowing that. I'm sorry. Describe something that you must do like every day for like the day to feel like this has gone right. For some people, it might be like running, going to the gym, some sort of physical activity or mindfulness practice.
I'd say going for a walk. I need to walk, get some sort of physical activity every day to really feel like I did something. I wish I used to be much better at it. But yeah, that definitely some sort of exercise for sure.
So what is the number one for you best thing about being an artist based in Philly?
The best thing about being an artist in Philly is the accessibility of just the street, the city itself. Yeah. I find it really easy to navigate. It's super easy to find your way around. You can it's small enough that you can get to know all the pockets, all the clicks, all the, I'm never one to like just get tight with one click. I like to kind of float around, and Philly's a great place to do that and not feel like you're lost.
I definitely agree with the sort of street thing. I usually time like how long it takes for me to get from where I'm coming from to where I'm going. And I think once I can kind of like find multiple ways to get to that point, I was like, okay, I know the place now. Yeah. And I'm coming from 30th Street Station or what have you. And initially it was like a 30-minute walk because I walked there. Mm-hmm. And now it's like I'm down to like about 20. And I was like, okay, I'm moving. I got it. I know where I'm at. I'm not going to worry about getting lost. And then there's construction because I'm coming down, I think, maybe Walnut, and then taking like 9th across. It was like, oh, I'm good. I know exactly where I'm at. I took the side streets I had to worry about. I don't know what that is in that alley, but I'm good.
You got to love that grid, man. DC is so ridiculous.
Oh my gosh!
I grew up there. I can't find my way around that city.
And they have this sort of like that how it's designed, that straight line that you can't get to the White House directly. And it's just like, this is just a maze.
Yeah.
This is intentionally a maze.
It is.
So this is the last question that I got for you. And I want points, right, for the way this is worded, because I think it's very good.
Okay.
Starting tomorrow, days are now only 20 hours. What's something that you cut out of your day? I'm patting myself on the back of a fool. What was something you cut out of your day if you are dropped down to 20 hours?
It doesn't make that much of a difference to me. I'm a night owl. I like when it's dark out. I like having the lights on in the house and the heat on and get cozy and turn on my music and get to work. I don't think I cut anything out. It doesn't. I like the winter months.
Okay.
Yeah, I get sick of them February, March, I'm ready for spring at that point. But this is a great time of year.
Yeah, because it's like, we've had this a little bit too. I'm more of like, because my birthday's in the latter third of January. And I'm like, once we're after January 20th, everything else can go. Can we just be back to spring?
Oh, yeah.
That's what I'm on. So that's it. That's all the questions. So I want to thank you for being on this podcast and taking the time with me. And I want to invite and encourage you to tell the fine folks, the listeners, where they can check you out, your work, website, social media, all that good stuff. The floor is yours.
Well, the easiest place to find me is on Instagram. I find that's the site that I get the most value out of. I'm off Twitter now, but I never really had much of a Twitter presence to begin with. Or just hit me up. You can always email me. I have an old school email. It's boruchow@yahoo.com. BORUCHOW. And if you're in Philly, keep your eye out for some weird black and white pay stubs.
So there you have it, folks. I want to again thank Joe Boruchow for coming on to the podcast. And I'm Rob Lee, saying that there's art in and around your neck of the woods. You just got to look for it.